Look around. Nearly 7 in 10 adults in wealthy countries are now overweight or obese. Anxiety and depression diagnoses have climbed for 2 decades straight. Teenagers are developing a disease that used to only show up in grandparents. And somehow, despite gyms on every corner and diet apps on every phone, none of it is getting better. So maybe it's time to ask a question nobody wants to ask out loud. What if this was never about willpower? What if the health advice itself was the problem? For years I worked emergency medicine, and I watched the same story play out on repeat. A patient comes in exhausted, or with chest pain, or blood sugar that won't behave. I ask about their lifestyle, and they tell me they did everything right. They cut calories. They walked every day. They bought the low-fat version of everything. And it still didn't work, or it worked for a while and then their body pulled everything back. The easy answer is to blame the patient. Not disciplined enough. Not trying hard enough. But when you see the exact same pattern in teachers, athletes, new parents, and retirees, you start to notice something. These people didn't fail the advice. The advice failed them. Somewhere along the way, health guidance got simplified so far down for mass communication that it stopped matching how the human body actually works. Back in 1977, governments rolled out the first official dietary guidelines. The message was simple: cut fat, especially saturated fat, and heart disease would drop. Bread, rice, and pasta became the base of the food pyramid. Carbs got a pass. Fat became the enemy. But look at what actually happened next. Obesity didn't fall, it exploded. It doubled within 20 years. Type 2 diabetes, once a disease of older adults, started showing up in children. And the response wasn't to question the guidelines. It was to repeat them louder. Here's what nobody explained. When you strip fat out of food, you have to replace it with something, and that something was almost always sugar. Low-fat yogurt became a dessert in disguise. Skimmed milk got sweetened. The food industry followed the rules on paper while making products that were metabolically worse than what they replaced. Then there's calorie counting itself, sold as simple physics. Eat less than you burn, lose weight. Except your body isn't a calculator, it's an adaptive system. Cut calories hard enough and your metabolism slows down to match. Hunger hormones spike, energy crashes, sleep gets worse. This isn't a failure of discipline, it's basic survival biology kicking in exactly the way it evolved to. That's why so many people lose weight only to gain it back, often with a slower metabolism than before they started. The body doesn't know the difference between a diet and a famine. It just responds the only way it knows how. Now let's talk about BMI, because chances are a doctor has used it to label you at some point. It was invented in the 1830s by a Belgian mathematician who wasn't even a physician. It was built to describe populations, not individuals, yet somehow it became the go-to number for deciding who's healthy. The problem is BMI can't tell the difference between muscle and fat. A rugby player with 10% body fat can land in the exact same category as someone carrying dangerous amounts of visceral fat. One is in peak condition, the other is metabolically at risk, and the formula treats them identically. Meanwhile, almost nobody talks about the muscle we lose as we age. After 30, without resistance training, you lose a noticeable percentage of muscle mass every decade, and it speeds up after 60. Muscle isn't just for lifting things, it's metabolically active tissue that absorbs blood sugar and keeps your metabolism running. Lose it, and everything gets harder, insulin resistance rises, bones weaken, falls become more danger. The advice for decades was walk more, take the stairs. Fine for your heart, but walking doesn't build muscle. It doesn't create the stress that forces your body to adapt and grow stronger. Only resistance training does that, and it barely got a mention next to cardio in most health campaigns. That gap alone may explain why so many people feel weaker and more fragile with every passing year, despite technically staying active. So why do diets keep failing even for people who really try? Part of the answer is that willpower isn't unlimited. It's a resource that runs down over the course of a day. Every decision you make chips away at it, so by evening, when you're deciding between cooking dinner or ordering takeout, there's barely anything left in the tank. Blood sugar plays into this too. Your brain runs on glucose, and when it dips, self-control goes with it. That's why bad food choices tend to happen when you're already hungry, tired, or stressed, not because you're weak, but because your brain is temporarily running on empty. This is why habits beat motivation every time. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions fade. Habits run on a completely different system in the brain, one that doesn't need conscious effort once it's built. Someone with a gym habit doesn't debate going, they just go. The decision has already been made for them by repetition. Sleep ties directly into all of this, and duration alone isn't the full story. 8 hours means nothing if it's the wrong 8 hours or badly timed. Late nights on screens delay the hormone that signals your body it's time to sleep. Eating close to bedtime keeps your body busy digesting instead of repairing. A room that's too warm blocks the deep sleep your body actually needs. None of this made it into the standard advice, which stopped at get 8 hours and called it done. Here's something that rarely makes it into a doctor's office conversation. Chronic low-grade inflammation might be behind more fatigue, brain fog, and even depression than we've ever admitted. Not the swelling from a sprained ankle, but a quiet, constant background hum that slowly wears down your body and brain. Depression was treated for decades as purely psychological, something to fix with therapy or medication alone. But a meaningful portion of cases line up with elevated inflammatory markers. When those markers rise, they interfere with the exact brain chemicals responsible for motivation and mood. Some people who don't respond to standard treatments see real improvement once the underlying inflammation is addressed. Then there's the gut, which produces the majority of the body's serotonin. An imbalanced gut microbiome has been linked to higher rates of anxiety and depression, yet this connection barely gets mentioned outside of specialist research. Diet plays a direct role here too. Ultra-processed foods and certain additives can damage the gut lining, letting bacterial particles leak into the bloodstream and trigger inflammation throughout the body. Sleep loss and chronic stress both add fuel to this fire. Even a single bad night of sleep raises inflammatory markers. Constant stress keeps cortisol elevated until the body stops responding to it properly, and inflammation climbs as a result. People were told to see a therapist, get more sleep, and manage stress, all genuinely useful, but almost none of it touched the biological roots sitting underneath the symptoms. Somewhere along the way we stopped eating a chunk of our calories and started drinking them instead. Take fruit juice. An apple gives you fiber and water bound together, so sugar releases slowly and you actually feel full. Squeeze that same apple into juice and you strip away the fiber, leaving something your body processes almost like a soft drink. A glass of orange juice and a glass of cola aren't as different as the marketing suggests. Smoothies carry the same trap. Blend 3 bananas, a handful of berries, and some almond milk, and you can drink 60 grams of sugar in under a minute, something that would take almost an hour to chew through as whole fruit. Liquid calories skip the mechanical signals, chewing, stomach stretch, that normally tell your brain you've had enough. Ultra-processed foods push this further by design. They're engineered for maximum reward and minimum satisfaction, so you keep eating past the point your body actually needs. Add in stress that never gets a chance to switch off, elevated cortisol day after day with no recovery, and you get a body stuck storing fat, sleeping poorly, and staying inflamed. None of this is about blame. Your body is following its programming perfectly. It's the instructions that were wrong. Here's something most people don't know. Doctors receive almost no training in nutrition or lifestyle medicine. Medical school is built around diagnosing disease and prescribing treatment, not preventing it in the first place. Biochemistry gets taught in detail, but almost nobody teaches you how to help a real patient rebuild their metabolism through food, movement, and sleep. So when the advice fails, both doctor and patient assume the patient just didn't try hard enough. That's the real story behind decades of health advice that quietly made millions of people sicker. It wasn't a lack of effort. It was a map that was wrong from the start, built for populations, not people, simplified past the point of usefulness, and repeated louder every time it stopped working. The good news is the real map isn't complicated. It just requires looking at the whole picture: hormones, sleep, muscle, inflammation, stress, instead of one number on a scale. You don't need 10 changes overnight. Pick one. Eat protein at breakfast. Walk after a meal. Lift something heavy twice a week. Go to bed at the same time each night. Your body was never broken. It was following orders the entire time. Once you understand what those orders actually are, everything gets a lot easier to change. Part 8 Optional Bonus Section, 1328 Characters. Quick note on 2 things almost every health checklist gets wrong. First, drink more water sounds harmless, but water without minerals can actually throw your body off balance. Sodium, potassium, and magnesium regulate everything from muscle function to nerve signals. If you sweat a lot, eat mostly whole foods, or exercise regularly, plain water alone might leave you low on the electrolytes you actually need, showing up as fatigue, cramps, or brain fog that gets mistaken for dehydration. Second, not all exercise does the same job. Walking is great for your heart, but it won't build muscle or raise your fitness ceiling. Zone 2 cardio, moderate effort you could hold a conversation through, keeps your metabolism flexible and able to burn fat efficiently. Short bursts of high-intensity work protect something called VO2 max, one of the strongest predictors of a long healthy life. Resistance training builds the muscle that keeps your blood sugar in check and your bones strong as you age. The old advice, move more, get your steps in, wasn't wrong, it was just missing the details that actually make movement effective. Adding one piece, a short walk after meals, 2 weekly strength sessions, a pinch of salt in your water, does more than following any generic checklist ever could.